And there is a God who loves me. He wraps me in his arms, and that is the place where I'm changed, and that's where I belong. Take me to the place, Lord, to the secret place where I can be with you, and you can make me like you. Wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your arms. And there is a God who loves me. As to me, He wraps us in. He wraps us in His arms, and that's the place where I'm changed. And that is the place where I'm changed. That's where I belong. And that's where I belong. Oh, take me to that place, or to the secret place where I can be with you, and you can make me like you. Wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your arms. Take me to the place, God. Take me to that place, Lord, to that secret place where I can be with you. You can make me like you. Wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your arms. Wrap me in your arms, 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 God. Wrap me in your arms, wrap me in your embrace, wrap me with your embrace, God. We need nothing else, God. We don't want anything else but your love. Won't you wrap us in grace right now? Won't you wrap us in peace right now, God? Won't you wrap us in grace right now, God? Won't you wrap us in peace right now? Oh, wrap us in majesty, and wrap me in your arms. Wrap me in your arms, yeah. Come on, wrap me in your arms. Wrap me in your arms, God. Standing next to you is pure clarity. What I wouldn't give for another moment just like this. Better is one day than 1,000. Oh, better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. One time. Better is one day in your courts. Better is one day in your house. Better is one day in your courts. Thousands. This is everything. This is everything that I ever dreamed it would be. Standing next to you is pure clarity. God, what I wouldn't give for another moment just like this. Better is one day than 1,000.
Welcome. We're here. What a great worship we've had, being in the presence of God to sing, to give God praise. And today we're going to start a 3-week conversation where we're going to talk about a theme that for me is important, especially now that we have been in our homes now a little over a month, doing family together, living with each other, pretty much 15, 20 hours of the day, doing life as a family. And today I want to talk about, for the next 3 weeks, we're going to have a 3-part series conversation talking about the elephant in the room. We're going to be addressing the elephant in the room. So I want to encourage you to don't miss out every one of these parts, because for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about the elephant in the room. And this phrase for us, the elephant in the room, is a phrase that I think for the most part we all understand and we all have used at some point in our lives. And so the question is, well, what is the elephant? What do you mean the elephant in the room? For those of you who perhaps may not know what this means. Well, the elephant is that thing that's so obvious, but we don't address it. Yet that thing is right in front of us all of the time. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation with your spouse, with your children, with your friends, co-workers, or etc., that you know someone or even yourself has an issue, has a problem, yet you don't want to address the issue, but you know it's there, and you know it's pending, and you know it's unresolved, but we have decided to ignore and not deal with it. Sometimes we are guilty of things and issues that we know people have, and we don't confront them because in our minds we interpret that ignoring a person's situation is our way of telling them that we love them. Sometimes we have a problem and we think that ignoring one's problem means that we are lovable. But that does not mean that we're lovable. Loving confronts. Loving addresses the issue. Loving has to be demonstrative by confrontation. And so it would be foolish from our part to ignore any specific issue and disguise it under, is that I love her so much, I don't want to get her upset. Is it I love him so much, I don't want him to be upset. Is that I know that if I tell him, he's not going to love me. That's not love. Love speaks truth. Love speaks truth. The problem is that many of us rather not confront a person because we don't know how to confront a person. Because we don't have the tact, and I'm going to talk about that further down. We don't have the tact on dealing with people. And so consequently, whatever you don't address on a personal level or something you know someone else has, and whatever you don't address turns into a habit. And habits that are not addressed turns into lifestyle. And lifestyles that are unresolved turns into addictions, and addictions turns into strongholds. But a stronghold doesn't start overnight. Someone has to address the elephants in our rooms, the elephants in our homes, the elephants in our living rooms. Because every addiction starts small. A little thing every day makes a huge impact. Someone who's a nicotine addict, someone who's a cigarette addict. Well, you didn't start smoking 4 boxes of cigarettes in a week. You didn't start smoking a pack of cigarettes a week. You started with 1. Those that are bound to alcohol, alcoholics, they didn't start drinking bottles and bottles of alcohol. Started with a little drink, 2 drinks, 3 drinks. And everybody started seeing a difference and a change, and something's not right, but nobody addressed the issue. And now someone, perhaps that you love, is bound to alcoholism because no one ever confronted the elephant in the room. Same thing with someone's attitude, someone's character. You know that child, that child is disrespectful to everybody, and you're like, oh, he's so cute. Oh, she's so pretty. Oh, look how she's something. Look at her move her hands. And nobody never addressed the issue. Now, at 20, that's not pretty. But unresolved issues turns into habits, and habits turns into addictions. Addiction turns into strongholds. Unresolved issues. Well, Pastor, I don't smoke. Pastor, I don't drink. Pastor, I don't do this, that, or the third. Well, let me give you. There are some people that are addicted to social media. Addicted to Facebook, Instagram. Addicted to your phones. Some of y'all, when you bought your phone, the last thing you thought you was going to be was addicted to that little machine you have in your back pocket. Oh, I'm just going to use it for phone calls. I need a little bit of Wi-Fi, take a couple of pictures, do some filters here and there. Now, some of us cannot live without that phone. And when you bought your phone, you were just thinking, oh, it's going to be a device to communicate, only to realize that you are obsessed by it. And no one ever told you, hey, listen, you're spending too much time on your phone. Hey, you're too focused on how many people like your comments. Nobody never addressed us on an issue, and now we're bound to that issue. I'll never forget one time I went to a restaurant. And after I was almost done with my meal, I went to the bathroom. When I go to the bathroom to wash up and use the bathroom, I see a man in the urinal, and as he's using the restroom, he literally has his Facebook page open on top of the urinal. Talk about addiction to the fullest. Couldn't finish using the restroom without putting himself up to date with who's liking and watching what he's doing. If you, listen to me, if you don't plan for these things to take over your life, they will eventually take over your life. Because no one in this room, not you in your house, no one has ever said, I want to be addicted to this. I want to be addicted. No one plans to be addicted and bound to a thing. No one. But if no one addresses us on those things, we eventually become, listen, we're creatures of habit. And so it's important as we navigate life that someone can confront us with the truth and confront us with the elephant in the room. Now, there's a danger. And I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the danger of not addressing the elephant in the living room. The danger of not confronting the elephant in the room. We all know the story of Adam and Eve. God gave rules to Adam. God was clear as day to Adam. You can eat from every tree of the garden, but this one you can't eat, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What did Adam and Eve do? They ate from the tree. They disobeyed. And what did God do? It's okay. I don't want to confront them because, they're so nice. And you look how good they took care of the garden. No. God confronted. God confronted the elephant in the room. And God said, didn't I tell you not to eat from the tree? And sometimes we feel that when we confront people, we interpret that as being hateful. God, who is love, confronted the first family on the issue. He didn't wait for the elephant to grow in the living room. As soon as it happened, God confronted. Now look at what happens. God confronts Adam. And look at what Adam does. Adam says, the woman you gave me. And so God says, okay, Eve, what happened? And the Eve said, the serpent. Isn't that crazy? They both blamed somebody else, and they kept on living as if nothing happened. Consequence, God said, because of the sin, you're going to get kicked out of the garden, Adam and Eve. Because of the sin, Adam, you have to work, and with the sweat of your brow, you're going to have to work. Consequences. And you know what happens? From chapter 3 to chapter 4, the Bible doesn't register the conversation that they had. So I don't know if they had a conversation. And so look how chapter 4, verse 1 starts. It starts, I'll say, now Adam knew Eve. That word knew is to have relationships. Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore it again, and this time his brother Abel. And now Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So now they are living life. They're living life after they got evicted from the garden. They're living life as if nothing happened. How awkward this must have been for them. They didn't talk about all of the blaming they did before they got kicked out the garden. And if we're honest with each other, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you or your spouse with another couple, and a spouse tells something to the other couple about the wife, and the spouse is like, or the wife is like, wait till we get home. We got to talk about what you just said. No. They didn't talk about this. They didn't deal with the issue. Wait a minute. How dare you throw me on the bus and tell God that the reason why you messed up was because of me? Who are you, Adam? That conversation never happened. They did not confront the elephant in the room. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about the blame game they played. They didn't talk about the eviction. We got kicked out of the garden. They didn't talk about the pain that happened, and now we got to sweat, and now you got to have labor pains when you have a baby. They didn't talk about the arduous labor they had to do. They didn't talk about the embarrassment of having to be kicked out the garden. That was never a conversation. And the elephant in the living room of Adam and Eve kept growing and growing and growing and growing. They didn't talk about it, and they lived as if nothing happened. So the question is, what is the result of not addressing the elephant in the room? Well, the result of not addressing the elephant in the room is false perception. What do you mean, Pastor? When you start assuming a false concept of reality, you start lying to yourself. You start justifying yourself by the way you think, assuming that what you're thinking is right. This is what happens When you don't address, this is the result of not addressing the elephant in the room. You have a false perception. Number two, you start living life separatism. And this happens in families. Some of our families, we don't talk with the other. Hey, we talk about people behind curtains, and when we come together, hey, we can't talk about the law. As soon as we get into them, let's not talk about this. Close this, put it away. We don't confront some issues. This happens in families. This even happens in the church, unfortunately. It happens in social relationships. And this is the dynamic that happened with the first family in the Bible, because they decided not to address and confront the elephant in the room. So, as I close, I want you to leave this reflection asking yourself, am I allowing things, unresolved issues, to grow roots of bitterness in my life and in my family because I don't address it? Am I living a false perception of what really is going on in my home and in my family? Am I living in cliques, in groups, in cliches, faking something that I know it's not right, when all I need to do is confront the issue that's in my home? That's what I want you to reflect. That's what I want you to ponder on. That's what I want you to analyze, because next Wednesday, we're going to talk about some other things that I believe that it's important. I want to talk about some other things that's going to help us understand what do we need to do. And that is, how do we address the elephant in the room? Until next week, pray you reflect on this. Take some notes. Try to identify those elephants in your room and find how can I address them in a godly way so that my family and me personally can grow. Have a good night. I'll see you next week.